As a designer, have you experienced a non-paying customer in your projects? We have a lawyer to share his views about a case study on a design and build firm that encountered collection problems with the client after the completion of the project. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Office Designers Expert Talk. Today we will be talking about ways to recover unpaid construction invoices. Our guest expert here is Mr. Khelvin Xu of the distinguished Singapore law firm Rajah Tann. Hi Kelvin,
Hi.
I hope you can shed some light on some pressing issues about non-payment of work in the construction industry. Well, our case study will be about a commercial renovation project. A business owner, the client, has awarded a renovation project of an F&B establishment to a design and build contractor. Everything was working well, and the owner has agreed to a fixed contract amount of $80,000 and paid 50% down payment for the project. The rest are to be paid in progress claim of 20% upon a certain milestone and 30% upon completion. The project was smooth until the invoicing of the second progress payment is due. Upon billing the client, they start to be erratic and unreasonable on the works performed by the contractor and demanded that the payment be made in full only after the completion. Since the contractor wants to build a good relationship with the client, it decided to continue the project until it's fully complete. The project has been finished and it is to be built in full. So again, the client has raised unreasonable demands and claims that the work is not complete, although all plans and specifications are followed. After constant collection requests for almost 120 days, the client never responds to the contractor's calls and demand emails. Yet, they already opened their new establishment and operated the business ever since the premises has been completed. Now, the question is, what will be the best course of action for the contractor to recover the balance payment?
First, James, thank you so much for the opportunity to share today. And of course, whatever I share would be on a general information basis. If you have a problem, speak to your lawyer. Now, let me answer your question, James. There are some options. I'm not sure which is the best option. What some companies do is they continue to send their own correspondence to chase up on the debt. But if the correspondence has really been ignored for 120 days, I'm not sure whether that's going to be effective. What some people do is they take to social media, they start to leave a lot of angry messages on the Facebook page of the eatery. But again, that can backfire. And we've got cases where people are accused of making defamatory statements, right? So we want to be pretty careful about that.
Definitely.
Some companies also engage licensed debt collectors whose job is basically to make life as difficult as possible for the debtor in a legal way until the debt is paid.
Yes.
But again, the success rate varies. And of course, for many companies, the last resort is to engage a lawyer to send out a letter of demand, and if a letter of demand is ignored, to take legal action against the debtor.
But how effective is the letter of demand since other considers this as a bluff?
Let's talk about the function of the letter of demand. The letter of demand by itself doesn't force the debtor to do anything. Well, quite right. If the debtor chooses to completely ignore the letter of demand, there isn't actually anything that the contractor can do in this case. But the letter of demand serves to send a strong message to the debtor or the customer that the contractor is serious about the claim. The contractor has already taken the step of going to find a lawyer, a law firm, and a lot of times, if the letter of demand comes from a reputable law firm, it sends a further signal that the contractor is done waiting, the contractor is prepared to bring out the big guns, and if the customer still doesn't pay up the debt, then the customer has got to be prepared for legal action.
Okay.
As to whether it is a bluff, well, it will depend on the psychology and the relationship between the contractor and the customer. So it is really for both parties to decide for themselves
Yes.
whether or not it's a bluff or whether the contractor is prepared to follow up from the letter of demand.
Okay. What other forms of settlement are available, like mediation, arbitration, or litigation?
Okay, let's break down those three things you mentioned. Let's talk about mediation first. Now, mediation is a process where both parties sit down with a neutral third party who is the mediator.
Okay.
And the mediator will try to broker some kind of agreement or settlement between the parties.
But is this still out of court settlement?
It is out of court.
Okay.
And the key good or bad thing about mediation is that it is completely voluntary, which means if one party chooses not to mediate, the other party generally cannot force them to do so, unless, for example, there is a mandatory mediation clause in the contract. But that's a separate story altogether.
Yes.
Okay? But even if the parties are forced to go for mediation, at the mediation itself, the mediator doesn't have the power to force parties to come to a settlement.
Yes.
All the mediator can do is to try to facilitate some kind of agreement between the parties. If one of the parties turns up for mediation and chooses to walk out within the first half an hour, well, there's nothing that anyone can do. Okay, so that's mediation.
Okay.
Good because you have complete control over your destiny. Bad because the other party also has control over their destiny.
Correct.
Okay, so you mentioned arbitration.
Arbitration, yes.
Now, arbitration is a process where the parties appear before, again, a neutral third party. This time it is an arbitrator. The arbitrator will decide on the matter. So arbitration is actually quite similar to litigation, to going to court, which I will touch on later. The key difference between arbitration and litigation will be, number one, the rules are different. The rules will depend on the arbitration rules that the parties have already agreed to. Sometimes the rules make the process a bit faster and a bit cheaper, but there are many different ways to arbitrate, so that may not necessarily be the case. The other advantage of arbitration compared to litigation is that arbitration is confidential. In other words, unlike court proceedings, what happens within arbitration stays confidential between the parties. So, for example, if you have a big dispute between companies that are publicly known, sometimes they would prefer to go for arbitration to preserve the confidentiality of the dispute, because no one really wants to air their dirty linen
Definitely.
in public. So finally, we come to litigation. Now, litigation is the so-called default mode of dispute settlement. To put it in very simple terms, litigation is what you get when there is a commercial dispute and contractor A sues party B. So you go to court, you have to go by the court procedure. If the matter cannot be resolved, then the matter has got to go for a trial, and at the end of the trial, the judge will make a decision.
Okay. All right. Yeah. For arbitration, is there any cost involved in arbitration?
Yes. So when you go for arbitration, you would normally have to go under one of the arbitral institutes. For example, the most well-known one would be the Singapore International Arbitration Centre. So normally, there will be a few costs involved. First of all, just like going to court, you've got to pay your lawyers. And then when you go for arbitration, you normally have to pay a filing fee to the institute. And the filing fee can vary from institution to institution. You also have to pay the arbitrator or arbitrators. Sometimes that is collapsed within the filing fee. Sometimes it is a separate fee.
Okay.
And then finally, if you don't succeed in the arbitration, sometimes you may be ordered to pay some legal costs to the other side.
Okay. Yeah. So for litigation, what is the typical bill or initial cost for a formal dispute resolution in this regard?
Okay, it's a bit hard to generalize. And the reason it is difficult to generalize is because it really depends on the stage at which it really depends on the stage at which the dispute comes to an end.
Okay.
Take, for example, the situation where the contractor engages a law firm. The law firm sends out a letter of demand, and straight away the customer is get into making payment of the full debt. In which case, at that point, the legal fees will be very cheap. It
Yes.
could be just a few $100s or even the low thousands, could be.
Mhm.
But let's say the letter of demand is completely ignored by the debtor. Okay, the customer doesn't even call up the contractor on the site to try and work something out. And the contractor decides there is no choice but to go to court. In which case, just to start the court proceedings, you are looking at a few $1,000. And if the matter cannot be resolved and it's got to go all the way to trial, the legal costs would easily be 5 digits, sometimes even 6 digits or more, depending on the scale of the dispute.
All right. Okay. So for this amount, the balance is around 40K. What is the threshold? Do you suggest that this 40K will trigger a formal dispute resolution?
It's a bit difficult to answer that question because this isn't so much a legal question as it is a commercial question.
Yes.
At the end of the day, as a business owner, the contractor would have to make a decision on, number one, what are the consequences if I don't go to court? Then I'll have to write off this 40K. On the other hand, if I do go to court, I'll have to talk to my lawyer first, get a cost estimate. The estimate will probably be a range. I've got to, with my lawyer's advice, decide what are my chances of winning.
Okay.
I've got to decide, even if I win, can I recover the amount which I'm awarded? What if the customer goes bust in the meantime?
Yes.
So I've got all these commercial considerations, and at the end of the day, I'll have to decide, based on the probability, which is the more likely outcome. I've got to make a commercial decision.
Look at your cash flow and
Exactly.
stuff. As a contractor, whether you can afford this.
Exactly.
Because like what you say, it's a 5-figure lawsuit if it will drag, right? Potentially. So that means you might lose money.
You might.
You might lose your 40K rather than.
The good thing is that if you do succeed after litigation, you would generally be awarded legal costs to be paid by the other party. But it is never going to be 100% reimbursement.
Yes.
So there will always be some shortfall between how much you have to pay your lawyers versus how much legal costs you are awarded, even if you succeed. So I hate to fudge the answer, but at the end of the day, it would have to be a commercial decision. And I think the one key issue really is what is the amount at stake? What is the debt at stake? If the debt is, for example, say a 4 million debt, then that's a different conversation altogether.
Yes.
Because the legal costs will be a much smaller proportion of this debt. But if in this case, as you said, it is a 40K debt, you've got a difficult commercial decision to make.
Yeah.
And to round up, for some people, putting aside the commercials of it, they decide they want to go to court over principle. And that's not something that I can disagree with either.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. There are alternatives. I know there are other alternative options for this, like the Security of Payments Act.
The answer is yes. What I've been discussing prior to this would apply to most commercial disputes. But in this particular case, because it is a construction dispute, for a construction which is happening in Singapore, what the contractor can do is that the contractor can proceed under the Security of Payments Act. You are correct. What the contractor would have to do is, well, probably he or she will have to engage a lawyer. They would send out a payment claim first.
Yes.
And after the payment claim is sent out, the customer would have the right to file what we call a payment response. And after the payment response is filed or not, the matter can go for adjudication. Now, the advantage of going for a Security of Payments Act claim is that it is much faster compared to going to court. But because the timelines are very compressed, so everyone has to work quite quickly under quite a bit of time pressure. So don't expect the legal bill to be just a few $100s either.
Definitely.
So again, you've got to decide from that commercial point of view, after having gotten an estimate from your lawyer, whether or not it's something that you want to pursue.
Okay. Because I can recall that BCA is the one, the Building Construction Authority is the one who initiated this bill for
Correct.
Securities of Payments Act. Right?
Correct.
So yeah, okay. So I think one of the best ways for the contractor is to really go through the Securities of Payments Act.
That's a real possibility. Correct.
Yeah.
But as with all things, because every case is different, so certainly, if you have a dispute that centers around construction, please, find a lawyer. Chances are you are not going to bring a claim on your own.
Yeah.
And have a chat with a lawyer. And if the lawyer doesn't raise the Security of Payments Act as an option, feel free to discuss that option with your lawyer and the pros and cons.
Yeah. So, what is the best advice you can give to the contractor to make sure that every project, or not of course every project, but that they will get paid?
Well, let's go back to your case study. Okay. And you mentioned in this case study that problems had already occurred at the point where progress payments were due and the customer didn't want to pay, but out of goodwill, the contractor still continues to do the work. Now, I'm going to pause and say that I understand that sometimes there are commercial reasons why the contractor would continue to put in the work. But to be very direct, at that point in time, when the project is only half done, and the customer is probably working on a tight deadline, you mentioned in this case study is F&B, so the customer would want to get all the work done before.
They wanted to open their
Exactly.
F&B.
And they have a limited fitting out period. After the fitting out period ends, they are going to start to pay rent. And if they have to pay rent, but the construction is not yet completed, and they don't have revenue coming in, that is going to be difficult for the business. So, to be very direct, that point in time, when work is still not completed, that is the time when the contractor really holds all the bargaining power. Now, I am not suggesting for one moment that the contractor should unreasonably look for problems or try to give problems to the customer and hold the customer hostage. I'm not suggesting that at all. But if from the contractor's point of view, all the work up to that stage has been done at a satisfactory level, and it is in accordance with all the specifications which are in writing, then there's really no reason for the customer to not pay up. And I would really question whether there is a need to maintain this goodwill if the customer seems to have cash flow problems, even at this early juncture. And again, going back to this case study, look, James, is F&B, and we know that F&B is a tough business in this town.
Yes.
If you want to wait until the project is finished, it's not as though the F&B business is going to start generating wonderful, fantastic returns for the business owner immediately. There are even more costs involved once they start operating, right? So the hard question that a contractor would have to ask in this situation is whether the contractor should continue doing work and incur expenses out of goodwill, or whether the contractor should hold firm and say, look, I'm sorry, but I'm also running a business. I also have mouths to feed. I also need to pay my subcons. Can you please make payment of the progress payment as agreed before I can continue work?
Yes.
And this is
That's
not
the
really,
scenario, right? Yeah.
it's not a legal solution. I think it's more of a commercial solution.
Yeah. I think we covered most of it. I have just one last question. This, according to this case study, after the completion of the work, the client, the F&B owner, opened the shop. Okay, so they operated the shop, even though they still owe the contractor about 50%. So, is there any legal issues or whatever? Or, I mean, that the contractor can, bring to court because they operated without even paying, or can they lock up the premises and all of those things inside are still not yet paid by the client itself?
Well, generally the answer is no. Again, I don't know what contract terms may exist between the parties, but generally, the fact that the F&B business owner can open for business will be a separate issue from whether there are any payments which are still outstanding and due between the customer and the contractor. Now, that being said, the fact that the customer is able to open for business, and I presume that there have been no further complaints from the customer in terms of the work done or any requests for rectification. I would say that that may well be an indication that actually the work has been completed to the customer's satisfaction.
Correct, precisely.
And it would be more challenging for the customer to then try and find other excuses or reasons to get out of making payment of the remainder.
Yeah, it's a proof that it's satisfactorily complete. That's why they can operate.
No,
right?
maybe not so much proof, but an indication.
An indication.
Maybe
Yes.
Another piece of evidence that can be used in the contractor's argument.
Okay, I think that's very good. I mean, most of the things that we discussed were covered. Okay, I hope our viewers will learn a lot from this interview. Thank you, Mr. Khelvin Xu, for spending time with us and sharing your views.
It's my pleasure. Thank you
Yeah.
for your time.
Yep, okay. I will leave your contact in the link below, just in case our viewers want to be in touch with you.
Sure.
So it's real issues, real talk, and real action. Thank you.
Thank you.